And the permission, I would say permission is the path to food peace. And so if somebody's experiencing a lot of cravings and they've built up this, I don't want to call it a story, but they have a story around what those cravings mean and what it means if they do respond, and this imaginary story of who they could be if they could stop responding to it. If we can just learn to just change all that and just be accepting that, humans have hunger of all kinds, I think it's a lot easier to manage.
And underlying what you're saying is an acceptance of desire, an acceptance of I'm allowed to desire, I'm allowed to want pleasure, which as women historically has been squelched. Today's guest describes herself as a midlife feminist dietitian badass. And honestly, we are so here for it. Jenn Salib Huber is a registered dietitian and naturopathic doctor who's helping women rethink everything they've been taught about food, weight, and health in midlife. She's the author of Eat to Thrive During Menopause, where she brings together intuitive eating and evidence-based nutrition to support women through perimenopause and menopause without dieting, deprivation, or body shame. And in this episode, we're getting into the real stuff: cravings, hormones, changing hunger cues, and what it actually looks like to support your body without trying to control it. Welcome, Jenn.
Thank you, Nina and Jenny. I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks for being here. I always love to ask our guests first, what led you to this? What led you to this journey of, creating such a wonderful education for people and such great service?
I love that question because I think that a lot of practitioners who, let's say, become specialized, focused, or very passionate about their area of work, there's usually a story there. And my story is like many other young women and girls that, I started dieting at 12 and had my own very messy experience with eating disorders and disordered eating and wellness culture and all of that, and thought I had it all sorted out until perimenopause crash landed at 37. And it was at that point that it just all started to unravel. And I was learning about intuitive eating, and I was trying to kind of navigate my own midlife menopause experience, and was trying to use hormone therapy, which I love for other people, but it just didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. And so I was left with this, well, now what? My body's changing. I'm waking up at 3 a.m. I'm having crime scene periods, and I hate my life. What am I supposed to do? And it really led me to start digging into what can I do? That acceptance of this is the reality for me. I can't go backwards in time. I can't change it, but I really want to create a future that I feel more positive about. And that's when I really saw the gap in the menopause and the menopause nutrition world, that no one was really talking about intuitive eating. No one was really talking about the surge in disordered eating, which we now see in the research as a second resurgence of eating disorder risk. And so for me, it was a personal journey that really became my passion, because I realized that I was far from alone, that my experience was not unique, unfortunately. And I guess that's kind of the shortened version of how I got to be here.
It's great. Well, lucky for us, that I'm sorry that you went through that, but lucky for everyone else that comes into your path. And so
there was something that interested me though there, because right away you were like, okay, and I love all the description, crime scene periods and crash landing. It's very violent, actually, the way that you describe it. And I think that that's important to reflect back, which is that we feel sometimes in these big changes in our body that it feels violent, doesn't feel like something we can navigate. So the thing that I'm curious about a little bit also, as you said, I went into the hormone replacement world, but that didn't work out. And I see you on social media saying, it may not work the way you think, and this doesn't have to be the way you do it. So I'm wondering if you could say more about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. And so I was someone that had a really great family doctor. I had a great, care team around me. And when we realized that I was 38, very much in the throes of perimenopause and having hot flashes in particular and night sweats that were waking me up all hours of the night, I was very excited to try estrogen therapy, but I also needed to take progesterone, which because I still have a uterus, and that's, what is required if you're going to use estrogen therapy. But I'm one of those people that's hormone sensitive. And in hindsight, I actually already knew this. I'm someone that I felt terrible during my pregnancies. My mental health was not at its best. I never tolerated the birth control pill. And I had actually tried progesterone therapy for endometriosis in my early 20s and also had to stop it because it didn't, work for me, or the side effects were not worth the potential benefits, I think is a better way to put it. And so after about 6 or 7 months of just trying all these different combinations, I was just feeling worse as the days went on. I was more tired. My mood was really suffering. I was not enjoying life at all. And I just felt hopeless. And, after 6 or 7 months, I thought, there has to be another way. And I am I'm a strong advocate for access to hormone therapy for menopausal symptoms. I am absolutely in agreement that it is a safe and effective option for most people. But I'm equally passionate about saying that it's not the only option. And so what we're seeing in this menopause space now is a little bit of like FOMO for, I see women now who are 10 years post-menopause and they're thinking, have I missed out? I had no symptoms. I didn't need anything, but did I make a mistake? And so I just like to bring the conversation back to, we know a lot about hormone therapy and some symptoms. If you're having 20 hot flashes a day, I can guarantee you'll be shouting the benefits from the rooftops a weekend. There's no question that it helps. But when we start marketing it and promising a panacea of it is going to be the solution to staying young, to aging well, to not gaining weight, to all of these things,
to never having a wrinkle.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and there are a lot of people like me who, when I started talking about my experience, I started hearing stories in droves from all kinds of people. And so I just like people to know that the best option is to have options and to have someone that you can trust to discuss those options with. But there's never going to be a single right way because we're all so individual.
Well, you're speaking to the need for everybody to listen to themselves. That just because someone says, here's the solution, it doesn't mean it's a solution for you. So I really appreciate you saying that.
I think we all know there was this horrific article some years back, which scared every woman on the planet away from HRT. And it was implicating, what it was doing to cardiovascular disease. It was a false research. And it took time for people to come back to it and understand, like, okay, it's going to be okay. It might actually help. I'm wondering where you sit. Just, I'm putting on your naturopathy hat for a second, if you don't mind. Where do you sit on the subject of bioidentical hormones? Is that different, better, same, as standard HRT?
Well, and that's a great question. And I usually say that the marketing of bioidentical hormones has been very effective at conveying a layer of safety, because that study, the WHI study that came out, that scared everyone off of hormone therapy. And kind of side fun story, my dad was an OBGYN in northern New Brunswick at the time that this was all happening. And I worked in his office in the summers. And, while his reception staff would go on vacation. And I have very clear memories of women just coming in droves and just not wanting to take their HRT anymore, and also suffering so much afterwards. And my dad saying, what are you learning in naturopathic school? What can we give these women? Because their hot flashes are back. And so I have a very, it's kind of an interesting experience to bring into all of that. But the bioidentical piece, I understand wanting something that sounds like it is closer to our own hormones. I think what most people, or maybe some people, don't understand is that a lot of the hormones that are used, even in the standard FDA or Canadian, whatever government approved hormone preparations, are also body identical or bioidentical. Some of them aren't, but a large number of them are. Some advantages of bioidentical hormones might be that they can be custom compounded into individual blends, but there isn't a lot of strong evidence that that's necessary. So it might be that what people are buying is the idea of this individualized approach, which it may be. And maybe that has value for some people, but I'm not sure that that's translating into the health benefits or the advantages that some people say it does.
Right. I think they just feel safer somehow, but because there are women that are still not convinced it's okay. It had a generational impact, I think.
It absolutely did. It absolutely did. And, there's so much that we're still trying to undo from that.
Yeah. And I just want a personal anecdote to sort of tie all this together is I had oophorectomy, my ovaries taken out because of BRCA gene, and went flying into menopause in my very early 40s. And they said, would you like to do HRT? And it was just then. And I was like, oh gosh, no, because the fear was so big. But then bioidenticals was on the market, and I was like, I'm going to go there. So I have 2 tiny little kids. I am schlepping for an hour to see this bioidentical person who is $600 a visit. And after one visit, I was like, I'm not doing this. I can't afford the time, can't afford the money, and I don't have any information, right? We're talking 20 years ago. I have no information on how this is going to go for me. And so I let the whole thing drop. And speaking of people who later went, oh my gosh, did I miss the boat? That was me, right? When everybody's like touting the miracle. And so that's when I always would love when you're on there saying, yeah, could be a solution for you, but maybe not. Listen to yourself and how you respond to hormones historically.
Sure. And one of the things, we all know is that while everything is busy changing in our bodies in that moment, so do our appetites, our cravings. I want to talk about, you use a phrase, decoding food cravings, which I love, because there are many elements to that, aren't there, including hormonal and nutrition and emotional. So I'm wondering if you can break that down a little for us.
Yeah. So I would love to ask you a question, if you don't mind answering. How do you define a craving?
Well, I will say that it's when somebody actually has the sensation that they must have something. They may not know why, but they just know they have to have it. And if there's something that they have to fight in order to have it, then it feels like a craving. But it would be great if they didn't fight it and just had it because their body's telling them to have it. But it feels like a have to.
Yeah. And I would say something very similar. When I ask women that question, when they say, I'm having so many cravings, and I say, well, how are you experiencing the craving? Tell me about that. It is almost always not related to hunger. And so I think that it's really important to recognize that hunger can be physical or hunger can be emotional. And craving has such a negative connotation with it, right? Like we associate cravings with addictions and things that are beyond our willpower and things that we have to use our motivation and, all of those things that are sometimes hard to access in order to control. Whereas if we describe it as a hunger, which is a biological drive, we can have physical hunger, but emotional hunger is also coming from a need that needs to be met. And so when we're experiencing emotional hunger, we might be craving a moment of pleasure. We might be craving a moment of rest. We might be craving a moment of connection, ice cream with your kids on the beach, a glass of wine and a dessert bar with your best friend, whatever it is. And so when we give ourselves permission to honor all types of hunger, including emotional hunger, and the reasons why the emotional hunger is showing up, that tension of feeling like we need to fight it becomes much quieter. And I think that means that the noise gets a lot quieter, and that internal dialogue of, am I doing something wrong? Is this the right choice? If I was a better person, if I had more whatever, I would be able to have more control over this. Because in midlife, and especially as we're going through perimenopause and menopause, we're not sleeping as well. Our moods are changing. We're experiencing a lot of identity changes. We may be having changes in our relationships and in our roles. There's a lot of things that could be behind some emotional hunger. And so I'm a really big fan of not pathologizing why you're experiencing it. It's not a personal flaw, to want to have something sweet at the end of the meal. That it's not a personal flaw to want to have dessert. And the permission, I would say permission is the path to food peace. And so if somebody's experiencing a lot of cravings and they've built up this, I don't want to call it a story, but they have a story around what those cravings mean and what it means if they do respond, and this imaginary story of who they could be if they could stop responding to it. If we can just learn to just change all that and just be accepting that, humans have hunger of all kinds, I think it's a lot easier to manage.
And underlying what you're saying is an acceptance of desire, an acceptance of I'm allowed to desire, I'm allowed to want pleasure, which as women historically has been squelched. And so it's so powerful. You're like talking about sort of what it looks like on the outside and our relationship with food to actually own. I want something. I desire something. I am lusty for something. I want pleasure.
As if that's not allowed. And that is an extension of diet culture, I think, right? I mean, even the word craving, in all of our practices, I'm sure we find that even the word craving, people are almost embarrassed to say. Like, how can I have a craving? Like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Because your
Or call it
body,
a guilty pleasure.
yes,
We
right,
use that
sure,
language too.
sure,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so I'm wondering, again, intuitive eating is still the phrase of the day all these years later, right? Because it has meaning. It has meaning. But I think it's been co-opted, and I think it doesn't always get communicated the way we mean. I'm wondering how you incorporate intuitive eating into the work that you do with your clients, because I noticed that, it's a phrase that we all use, and certainly you do as well. How do you integrate that?
Well, and I think that the framework of intuitive eating is not well explained by the terms intuitive eating, because some people have described it as expecting a crystal ball to emerge and be able to divine what they should have, or expecting some kind of clear and loud signal about being hungry and full and what they want and what they don't want. And so they feel that their intuition is malfunctioning if they're intuitively drawn to certain foods that they thought they shouldn't or didn't want to have. And so I like to describe intuitive eating more as a self-care framework for eating, because it is reflecting back, or it's getting us to practice that tuning in, and it's taking care of not just our physical, but also our emotional selves and all of the other parts of us that can be nourished by food. But I often describe it as like part 2 of a process. And for most people, there needs to be an unlearning. And that's what I call the undieting process. So I like to use analogies because it's just how I understand the world, or stories. But if we think about like MS-DOS, if anybody remembers that from the 80s and the 90s when we were running things, right? And you would get, an error, right? A syntax error. If you put in all this little code and then you would, hit enter and it was supposed to do something and it didn't, you would get a syntax error. Most of us are running code in our brain that has been programmed by diet culture. But we're just like applying this intuitive eating filter on top of it. But we're expecting the output to change. And sometimes it can kind of look like how we think it's supposed to look, but then something happens and we have a syntax error. So a lot of people that I start to work with are in that messy middle. They've left dieting behind. They're never going back to diet culture, but they do not feel confident as intuitive eaters because they've just put that filter on top. So the undieting is the unlearning, examining where did these beliefs about food and bodies and aging and menopause, where did this all come from? How do we start to uncouple those from the script that you want to be running? And then you run into fewer syntax errors.
Just imagine, if you will, for a moment, freedom. Just freedom. To actually trust your body, trust your needs, trust what you want, go get it, not have any second thoughts about it. I mean, to me, that's such a critical piece of this. And yet, most of the folks that I work with, their interpretation starts out as, oh, I can now have anything I want, anytime I want, all the time. Well, sure, go for it. What do I care? Sure, have fun. But then they say, well, but that's not working either because that's turning into a binge. So it's still about being able to really regulate, like to be in touch with exactly what your needs are and to not be ashamed of them, to just have them. And it's it's part of the diet culture, that we're still part of, I think. Yeah. So how did you come to midlife feminist dieting badass? I love the phrase. How did you come to that?
I don't know exactly where that came from, other than it felt like it really described the different parts of me. I'm in midlife. I don't know if I'll ever feel out of it. At some point I will, I guess, but for right now, and I feel like it's a long stage. It's
I certainly hope so. Yes.
yeah,
Well, it's a
so
long stage that's actually not actually considered a developmental stage, which is something I really have an issue with, right? The way that adolescence is considered a developmental stage, the way that when people go into motherhood, we talk about it as a developmental stage. But midlife is just like, oh, you're just like living your life, but we are actually changing and shifting and evolving. So I love, and I think it'd be interesting to look at here. We've got this long stage, and what are those moments in that midlife process that make us who we are as we are aging and saging.
And I have theories that, as our estrogen levels are declining, that veil gets lifted a little bit, and the energy that we have spent nurturing things, and not to say that we're all just these biological robots, that's not what I mean at all, but just that, estrogen and oxytocin and all of those things serve a purpose and helping us connect and be in community and to nurture things, whether that's a rock, a plant, a child, a dog, doesn't matter what it is. And I think a lot of that then turns inward, and that ability to self-sacrifice indefinitely, some people would call that martyrdom, whatever it is, becomes physically uncomfortable. And we can no longer do it. And the discomfort comes when someone doesn't see that, when they are still trying to fight to go back. So I think the midlife evolution that happens is when you accept that this new hormonal soup that you're swimming in wants you to be first in line for the care that you have given other people. So that's where the feminist piece came in, is that, I'm in midlife. Feminism became very important to me, not in the traditional marching way, but in the everyday life of what it looks like. And also in advocating for healthcare and advocating for research for more women. There's such a dearth of research on menopause. It's shameful, especially on women, period, women in menopause, nutrition in menopause, like it's awful.
Unpredictable, yeah.
And then the undieting just really kind of defined it all, that it was very much part of the unlearning. I always love Gloria Steinem's quote that, before we learn, we have to unlearn. It's the first thing we have to do.
And since you mentioned Gloria, we have to say that yesterday was her 92nd birthday while we are recording. So happy birthday, Gloria.
And she has a book coming out in September, which I have already pre-ordered. I cannot wait.
God bless you.
Yeah. So, and then just kind of like, it's badass to go against the grain, and it feels good to be a badass going against the grain in this instance.
I think so. Yes. I mean, there are those.
That's why I put it on a mug.
I love it. I love it. I love it. At the end, we'll tell people how to get those. It inevitably leads us to the conversation of the day, because I'm curious to know how you integrate this or what you're feeling about it. And that is the onset of GLP-1 medications. They're here to stay. They're not going anywhere. I'm wondering if this is coming up in the work that you're doing. Are people either asking for them? Are they coming to you after they've been on them? Are they coming to you instead of being on them? I'm wondering, how that's played out for you.
Yeah, I mean, yes to all of it. It's like you said, these medications are here to stay. And it's very interesting, actually, being a Canadian living in Europe, but having been recently in the States last October, being exposed to the different levels of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
People are surprised when I tell them that in at least a large percentage of Europe, and certainly here in the Netherlands, direct-to-consumer marketing for medications is not allowed. So
It used to not be allowed in this country. I'm old
I
enough
have
to remember that.
never seen an ad for a GLP-1 or a heartburn medication. It just does not exist. And so that is a very different environment than when I was in Buffalo in October and watching the local TV, and it was every third commercial. I counted it for 30 minutes. Every third commercial. Canada's slightly different in that we don't allow marketing of the medication, but we allow marketing of the condition, and it can be sponsored by the drug makers. So, everybody knows who's doing it, but it's slightly less intrusive. And so what I tell people, especially who are maybe feeling some FOMO, like maybe they have not been, requested to take this medication. Maybe they don't have a pre-existing health condition that would make them consider it, but they're starting to feel the FOMO of it because their friends, their family, all of Hollywood is now shrinking at a rapid rate. One of the things I like to remind them is that the marketing is doing exactly what the marketing is supposed to do. It's getting you to think about it all the time and getting you to feel like you're missing out on something.
But we understand that women who have always felt either uncomfortable in their own skin, uncomfortable in their bodies, right? Now they're watching bodies shrink around them. And I'm hearing women say things like, right, so you want me to go intuitive here? I'm watching everyone around me drop to half their size. I can't manage the competition in my own mind. And to think that it could be that easy.
I mean, I don't think anybody has all the answers to this. If they do, please, I'm happy to pay you to teach me your answers because I don't have them all. What I always like to say is what is going to bring you the most peace and confidence in the body that you have today and the body that you have tomorrow, meaning like the future, not literally tomorrow. And I think that's
a tricky thing, though. I think that's a tricky thing to ask, because I think depending on where you get somebody in their stage of unlearning and undieting, they'll say the thing that will make me the happiest is to be in a small body, and I will do anything. But I've worked with women, and then their idea of what would make me happiest is to truly feel at home as my body changes, because I know it will as I evolve through this midlife and the hormonal soup. So I think it's like we have to come in with the container of, yes, there is historic pressure for you to equate size and happiness.
Absolutely. And I don't use the word happy ever. I'm very clear in saying what is going to give you the most confidence. And I usually help them define confidence as, but like, what would it look like to feel confident in the body that you have today? Because that's what they want. They just want to feel okay, right? And confidence is ease, trust, peace. And when we start to break that down a little bit, I think then they can see that this feels like it's a low-hanging carrot for them. But if it means that they're going to have to stay on it the rest of their life, if it means that they may have side effects that they may not enjoy, that may not go away, that may prevent them from continuing to take it, that they may, a lot of people that I'm working with are heeding the message about protein and muscle when they're on this medication, but that has now become the source of their anxiety.
Yeah, it's the new, and I'm putting this in air quotes, the new noise. It's the new,
exactly.
Right.
So there is no easy answers. But I would love to see more research on especially the body image piece, because I'm sure you've both seen this as well, but the body image issues don't resolve. For some people, they are getting worse, at least what I'm seeing, because, what they're seeing in the mirror has changed so rapidly and doesn't look like when they were 18, which is what their mind convinced them would happen if they lost the weight. And so it's just messy is the only way to describe it. It's messy and it's complicated. And I don't want people to feel shame for deciding to use these medications. Because the flip side is that it is a medication, and that for some people it's being used, it's medically indicated, not necessarily for the weight loss. And the weight loss is a side effect of this medication. And that's what people are using it for. But again, it's messy.
It is messy. It's a statement about our culture as human beings that when you ask people what is the thing they're most afraid of, number 2 is death. Number 1 is public speaking. When you ask people, what are you willing to do to be in a thinner body? Side effects are okay. Just don't have me be fat. Fat would be my first fear. Side effects would be number 4. So it's just interesting that that's an outgrowth of our diet culture as well, Yeah.
One of the things that we recently spoke to Marianne Cohen, who's a psychologist, and I want to just bring in something that she said that's worth repeating, is that for people who are on the GLP-1s, just like you said, Jenn, the body image piece doesn't go away. So if you're choosing to step into that world, it's so important to be supported psychologically, working on body image, nutritionally, really getting a holistic support so that you can navigate it while listening to yourself and supporting your body deeply.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
That was my PSA for today.
Thank you. We appreciate it very, very much.
Yeah, you're welcome there.
So Jenn, in closing, if you could send a message to all women through the entire planet, and you really wanted, no pressure, and you really wanted them to get it, on this subject, I mean, what is it? I mean, other than being a feminist dieting badass, what would you want a woman to just take away, or even, I should say, their friends, their partners, their lovers, their children, all the people in their world who I'm sure are all listening to this podcast too. What would you want them to know?
I want people to know that we're going to spend a third to a half of our life in postmenopause. And menopause may be the end of your period, but it is not the end of you. Let the evolution happen. Our brains are evolving. That is, our brains become better. There's so much great research that they become better. Many women report being happier in postmenopause. And so let go of this idea that it is the beginning of the end. It is a transition. It is not always fun. There were going to be bumps in the road. Get the support you need to get through them, but do not dread what is waiting for you on the other side.
And it's beautiful. And the one thing I would add to that, as someone who's sort of, I guess, in technically postmenopause, is to always pay attention to bone health. Bone density is very, very important. Whether that means making sure that you're doing some form of weightlifting of some sort, or just having it monitored. I think every woman by the age of 50 should have a DEXA scan just to see what their starting level is. Because, I mean, when there's trouble later, that's where it happens. When
and if we're talking about the risks of dieting, certainly the risks of undernourishing, undereating, eating disorders on bone health is well established. And those risks don't go away as we get into menopause. And so we want to make sure that we know what's happening. So I'm also a big fan of knowing what your DEXA scan, getting a DEXA scan before you're menopausal, ideally, so that you have a baseline, because 10 to 20% of bone is lost during the transition. And so if you have that baseline and you have the right team of people to help support you, there's a lot that you can do through that lens of prevention.
Yep. And GLP-1s are making it a bigger issue, our bone density. And I also want to say, because I've heard it from several people, as I've suggested, please get a DEXA scan. They go to their doctor. And this happened to a friend of mine who's 62. And she said, I asked, they said, I don't need one till I'm 65. I said, did you tell them that you have been on a GLP-1? Did you tell them you need a baseline? She was like, oh, okay, let me go back.
And if somebody has a family history of osteoporosis, that is often enough to be able to get an early scan. So ask your mother, grandmother, aunts, anybody in your family. Yeah. Push back. And if it's possible to even access one, privately. And again, I know nothing about insurance in the States. But if you're able to access one as an investment in perimenopause, I think that is really helpful too.
Yeah, it's a great takeaway. Jenn, tell everybody where they can find you. I know you're in a lot of different places.
Yeah, probably too many. But so my podcast is the Midlife Feast, and I love having conversations like this. And it's very much about helping women manage menopause without diets and food rules. So that's a great place. And on Instagram, which is at menopause.nutritionist. And you can usually find links to all the things there. And then my book, which is Eat to Thrive During Menopause. And that's available wherever books are sold.
Fabulous. Thank you so
And
much
thank
for
you
being
so
with us.
much.
It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you. It was great. Thank you.
Have a great day.